From farm to table, the way you should be eating, up next on Carpe Diem. Hello and welcome to Carpe Diem. I'm Krystal Acosta. Nowadays, many people feel eating organic food is a fad or an expensive diet, but they don't see it for what it really is, a healthy way of eating. Organic farming used to be the way of life before mass crop productions and GMOs, genetically modified organisms. According to the United States Department of Agriculture, the USDA, organic farming produces products using methods that preserve the environment and avoid most synthetic materials, such as pesticides and antibiotics. One local farmer in the tri-state area is doing just that. Tony Bracco, owner of Bracco Farms, has local fresh produce naturally grown in the heart of Warwick's Black Dirt region. Let's take a look.
This is a farming community. Everybody in this valley is a farmer or works in a farm support industry. We have mechanics in town. They service most of the farm equipment. We have people who sell farm implements, farm tools and screws and bolts, whatever we need. So everybody in this valley either works, if they're not in education or law enforcement or whatever, they're farmers or in some sort of farm support. This is our main field here. And we started prepping it. We've plowed over here. We've disked, which first you plow and then you smooth it out with the disking. And we'll put out all our plastic mulch and then we'll organize everything into different rows by variety. And every year we alternate where the crops go because we don't want to grow everything in the same place, because if there's any pests, the pests will be there, but it confuses the pests if you move things around. This is our famous black dirt, because there's only 18,000 acres of it in the country, and it is 70% nutrient rich in many spots. And we don't have to add any fertilizers. We don't add anything. We just turn the dirt over. It's just so rich and dense with organic matter that it's just marvelous soil. And there's no rocks in it, which makes it really easy to work. We have a couple of rows that we started the other day, but it was too wet, so we had to stop. The dirt was getting stuck in all in the implements. We tried to do it on Saturday, but we couldn't. And today you can see the dirt is still moist, but tomorrow it'll be dry enough that we can start laying more plastic. And the plastic is not a dangerous plastic. It's safe. It has no dangerous chemicals in it. It's an inert plastic, which means it doesn't have any residues that'll leach into the soil. And we use it once, we lift it up. We can get a biodegradable one, but it's very costly and it doesn't work well. It degrades too quickly in the black dirt. You know? See, black dirt's not like other dirt. Other dirt, you can get away with a lot of things. You get rid of the weeds in upland dirt and the weeds are gone. You can't get rid of the weeds here because the dirt is just so rich and it's so moist that the weeds are a constant problem. The most we can do is just mow them. What we'll do in between the rows, we have rider mowers. We'll mow the weeds down and create a lawn where we can just walk. Otherwise, the weeds will be higher, we'll lose the crops. This is our other field. This is a 6 1/4 acre field. So to give you an idea of what 6 1/4 acres looks like. All the way down to the trees and all the way over to the next ditch. So this we're renting to someone. They're going to be growing soybeans here. And they're using a no-till method, which means they'll be just injecting the seeds right through the dead weeds, so they don't have to spray any chemicals. We operate our farm stand from this little shed here. We put out shelves and tables and we lay out all the vegetables we have for sale. People come in, and on Saturdays we do that and we get a good crowd. We set this up really beautifully so it looks very appealing. We're actually getting another tent because we need to double up. We're getting a lot of traffic. And we put a tent so it keeps everything shaded. The picnic table's usually out. We invite people to come sit. Sometimes we put out coffee and things like that. It's hard work, but it's good work. It's a good kind of tired at the end of the day. And that's basically the farm.
Joining me now is owner and farmer of Bracco Farms, Tony Bracco. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you for having me.
So, Tony, let's just start from the beginning. How did you get involved in the farm business?
Well, that's a good question. I've been a graphic designer, that's my trade, and educator, a teacher, certified teacher in art and art education. I've been running my own graphic design firm for the last 30 years. About 7 or 8 years ago, my wife and I, we were always looking to buy a small second property. We always, primarily it was me who wanted to get a small farm. And we were looking and looking, and we found this place in Pine Island. It was never intended to be a business. It was mostly going to be a recreational thing where we would grow maybe on an acre or so for ourselves. The farm is 25 acres, and the rest we would rent out. But what happened after the first season, it just took on a life of its own, and what started out as a hobby just became a business. And every year it's just been getting larger and larger and larger because we get a more and more of a following.
And your farm is organic. Why do you choose to have an organic farm?
Well, even though we are not certified organic, we use the term naturally grown to describe what we do because we are not certified and we're not seeking certification. But after doing a lot of research and finding out what is on most of the food that we eat in this country, particularly produce, we decided that when we were growing, even if it was for ourselves, we were not going to use any chemicals or any synthetic fertilizer or anything that would hurt us physically. So we follow those practices. Even though we are not certified organic, we follow the practices of the USDA organic program, which means we don't spray any chemicals, we don't use any pesticides, herbicides, or fungicides on our produce. If we do have to use something, we make sure it's certified USDA organic. It doesn't have any carcinogens in it. And the reason we are pursuing this is because we see the need for it. When you see what's in the supermarket, and you read almost monthly or weekly about someone getting sick from lettuce from other states or from out of the country, you see the need for it.
And why do you choose not to get certified?
It's my own preference. I do have farmer friends who are certified, and that's fine. But I like to be independent. I don't think, my own personal opinion is, by getting certification, it's going to change anything. Plus the costs involved, we don't want to incur those costs to do it. And plus, I'm not really comfortable that the USDA, which is the organization that you get certified through, also works with the people who are conventional farmers who are using the chemicals. So I would rather it be an independent agency that would be the agency that do the certification. Then we might be interested in doing something like that.
I always find it crazy when you go to markets or supermarkets and things are labeled organic,
right,
and they're more expensive because they're labeled organic.
Right.
Why do you feel that growing organically is more expensive? Does it have to be more expensive?
It should be only a little bit more expensive. I think they do exploit the word organic. It does take a little more cultivation. Remember, we're not spraying chemicals, so we have to be a little bit more hands-on, rotate more, make sure there's not pests on it. But I do believe it's pretty much a marketing ploy. Like I say, it does take a little bit more work to do.
How would you explain to somebody what organic farming is if they feel produce is produce? It doesn't matter where it comes from, doesn't matter how it was grown. How do you explain to them the benefits of having an organic farm?
Well, there's an old saying, our grandparents, we call it organic food, but our grandparents called it food because there was no spraying then. And if you look at the different diseases that have come into play now, autism and Asperger's and different things like that, since World War II have become more prolific. Why? Because it was after World War II that all the spraying began. Before that, it was very rare that you used any chemicals at all. Look at the legacy of DDT, what it has done. It almost it made the bald eagle extinct because of the eggshells. So imagine what it can do to human beings. So, but what happens is you have these large factory farms, and they're just interested in the bottom line. They have to produce product and get it out as quickly as possible with a minimum amount of damage and pests, so they'll use anything they can. Some lettuces and spinach and kale are sprayed with up to 60 different kinds of chemicals. So now that has to have some sort of detrimental effect to the human body or to an animal's body. So I see the need is that we really have to make sure that we get really good food on the table, and maybe a lot of these diseases that are in society now will start to eradicate.
So what do you say needs to be changed in the system? Do we need to start labeling food containing GMOs?
Yeah, absolutely. We should know, because there's so many questions about GMOs. The European Union doesn't allow GMOs. So there must be a lot of European countries and some South American countries now are getting rid of GMOs, including, and even in Asia, in India, they're starting to move away from that, not only because it may be dangerous, but the companies that produce these seeds own the patents on and charge an exorbitant amount of money from the seed. Most farmers, including myself, we save seed to save costs, especially like zucchini seeds, tomato seeds, things like that. But if you're using their product, you cannot save the seed. You have to pay an exorbitant fee to keep using their product.
When we visited your farm, you were telling us about how, here in our area, the produce is seasonal. You're not going to get tomatoes all year long.
No, you can't.
But you go to other places and supermarkets and there's tomatoes all year long, but they're not good for you all year long.
Well, they come from California, they come from South America, and a lot of them are picked unripened and gassed on the way to make them red, so they don't really see the sunlight. Some of them do. There's some good produce that comes from those places. But what happened is, I know when I was a kid, we used to eat seasonally. See, that's what that's part of our mission too, is to educate the public into what seasonal is. We didn't have, when we were kids, tomatoes in the winter, or peaches in the winter, or oranges. You had that in the summer and spring, and maybe in the fall if you were lucky. So you ate other things like root crops, cabbages and potatoes, things of that type, beets and turnips. So I think there's a big disconnect now. People think like, well, because it's a global economy, and they have refrigerated airplanes and railroad cars, we can get all this stuff really quick. So it kind of spoils you. But also the quality is not there either, because they have to move tons and tons of it every day.
Are you able to grow all year long on your farm?
We can grow. We have a large greenhouse, a 3,000 square foot greenhouse, but it's not heated. What we do is we put row covers inside, and certain things will survive, like lettuces and spinach and onions and some beets and turnips that will grow through the winter.
How do you maintain it during the winter, when it's crazy snow outside?
Very difficult. No. We try to get up there every couple of days anyway. And if we'll have someone, or we'll either do it ourselves, we'll get the snow out of there, because we have to get in there. But things grow slower in the winter, so they don't need to be watered as much. It's kind of a dormant time. And we only grow for ourselves. We don't really grow for market during the winter. We essentially close down the end of October, and then we reopen in March with getting things out there.
So what kind of crops are you able to maintain in the greenhouse during the winter?
Lettuces, spinach, onions, beets, scallions, turnips, things like that. That really like the cold weather.
And then during the rest of the year, what other crops do you have growing?
Oh, we have everything growing. Tomatoes. We do 23 varieties of tomatoes: heirlooms, artisans, and cherry tomatoes. We do lots of lettuces. We do 4 or 5 varieties of zucchini, 4 or 5 varieties of eggplant, lots of varieties of peppers, along with lots of beans and peas, pretty much a lot of legumes and a lot of onions, potatoes, pretty much anything you'd find it's a large variety of products.
Yeah, what would you say is the fan favorite of all your crops?
I think the tomatoes are the big, of course, tomatoes, followed by the zucchini. Zucchini's big. And we do a lot of business particularly with restaurants, with the zucchini blossoms. That's a delicacy. And when we do our CSA, we try to include some of the things that we give to chefs to make it interesting for our CSA members. We put them in there, things that you don't normally get in a CSA, like zucchini blossoms or edible flowers, things like that. And we get the chefs to contribute like a recipe on how to use it.
Yeah, and there's such a strong community behind the farm business, especially with the restaurant business.
Right.
What's your take on farm-to-table food?
There are farm-to-table restaurants out there, and I'm fortunate to work with a few really, really good ones. But there are some that have a disconnect, that they like to say they're farm to table, but they very rarely get out to the farm or even visit or know what we're really doing. But like people like that I work with, like you interviewed, like Steve Ernst from Westtown Fare and Bryan Gregg from Escape Montclair, they make the effort. They come out. Steve was at our farm yesterday picking up lettuce, so he makes the trip twice a week. And that's what you really want to have. Your farm to table, your chef has to be part of the picture, otherwise it doesn't work.
Well, farm to table is a beneficial and easy way to eat. 2 local chefs show us how it's done. Over the years, Tony Bracco has worked with a lot of clients and customers down at the farm. 2 chefs who always like to take a trip down and get a first-hand pick at the crops are Steve Ernst, owner of the Westtown Fare in Westtown, New York, and Bryan Gregg, owner of Escape Montclair in Montclair, New Jersey.
I'm very fortunate to be able to have found Tony, who had started this farm maybe 7 years ago. The reason being I like to deal with him all the time is because he doesn't spray, he doesn't use pesticides, and I'm able to come here, pick whatever type of food whatever he has growing at the time, and I always work my menu around what he has in that time of the season.
And Bryan follows the same philosophy. He tries to serve locally sourced ingredients that are seasonal, and that's a tough thing to do sometimes.
And responsibly grown too as well. It's a very important thing for myself, Tony, is making sure that we do the right thing when it comes to growing and serving the customers, so they're aware of lineage and where it comes from, and understanding the whole concept of what farming is, what farm to table dining is, and understanding the whole culture now that's becoming this big thing that's going on. Unfortunately, a lot of people like to say it's a fad, but it really isn't. It's something that should be done that way. It was done that way hundreds of years ago, and it's still done that way now. That's why at the restaurant we change pretty much daily. Sometimes our menu changes, and sometimes it's a challenge, but it's an exciting challenge that we feel that we can keep going with and keep focused with, and it's a big thing for us.
The beauty of this is I'm making my menu when I come here, because I don't always know what Tony has, and it's like, oh my God, all of a sudden these light bulbs go off.
My whole thing with farm to table and dining in general is understanding where your food comes from, being able to be on the ground, in the dirt per se, knowing what's going on, where the food is coming from, when it's coming in season, knowing what it takes to get it to your table, what the farmer does to get it there, the time and effort that he takes in place of getting the crops started for the season, and then holding up the crops, and then getting it to us, or us getting it to going to him, and that's what farm to table is about.
The less you do to this type of food, the better off you are, because you want the flavor of the food to be the main focal point. You really don't even have to dress it up too much. You don't want to hide the flavor with something else unless you're using something else from the garden.
That's kind of like our job as restaurateurs and serving local foods, is to explain that to our customers and teach them that this is the way you should be dining, not going out and eating a big old bowl of pasta that was made from tomatoes that were who knows where they came from. Like I said, that's an important thing for us.
Farm to table is an important philosophy that both chefs love to include in their dishes back at their restaurants.
I was able to pick up some beautiful greens that he has growing in his hothouse right now. We wash the greens and we toss them lightly with some pickled red onion, some orange segments, and just the simple green goddess dressing, and here's the end result. It is very tasty. To be able to have a relationship with your farmer, it's just, I think it makes the food that much better. There's more of a soulfulness, there's more of a emphasis on the priority of just making something so incredible, and it's basic cooking with good ingredients, and the good ingredients is the key.
We're gonna cook some farm to table food and show you kind of an idea where we're at with spring and what's available right now, and what's things that we got from Tony's farm, and that's about it. Now get going with that. This is some of the nettles that we picked at the end at Tony's farm last week, with a little bit of green onion tops that have been charred lightly. And we'll do is just kind of throw a little bit of that on the plate like that. Tony does a lot of beautiful microgreens on the farm that he's starting to bring into play now. We just dress the plate with them a little bit. These are radish, there's some cod soy on here, there's some arugula, there's some pea shoots, there's some sunflower leaves, and so forth, some kohlrabi. And they're all just nice spicy greens, just to add accent, because we do have some sweetness to this plate, so we just want to look for some spiciness to it as well. That's basically going to be the plate, just real simple. We do a lot of tasting portions here, so this would be like a little taste of, you know, one course out of, you know, maybe 7 or 12.
I call it art because these are like paintings, they're like sculptures.
That's a lot of our food here is about enhancing, keeping the quality product like we get at Tony's Farm pristine, clean, and just helping it a little bit. We're bringing the flavors out, and that's what cooking's all about. It's using great products, using properly sourced, properly raised and farmed, and not getting in their way. I've always said, no, farm to table, it's not a fad, it's kind of just the way it should be. And it's the way that you should prepare food, and you shouldn't be scared to ask your restaurant where the food's coming from. And they should be able to have a good answer for you about it too.
So 2 great chefs who really utilize the farm to table method.
Mm-hmm.
You have a long list of clients who follow the same route and who continue business with your farm year after year. How important is their support, and how important is your support for farm to table?
Oh, it works hand in hand. You know, we support each other, and by them using our product, it helps to get the word out about our farm, and it also helps to promote their farm to table business, because that's what the thrust of it is. They want to show. So they try to work with. They don't only work with me, they work with other farms. They may have meat purveyors, cheese, bread, even other produce farms, because we can't give them everything. But that's what makes the farm to table movement successful in that respect, is if you really work with the farmer and you really, and Bryan does he takes it one step further, Steve does too. They'll put it on the menu, which farm it came from. So that really helps the public can say, gee, I'd like to go visit that farm and see what they're about.
Well, one thing that I really loved, that as their restaurant decor, they had plaques that said all the farms that they purchase from.
That's correct.
I thought that was really cool, because you get to see, if you're a customer in the restaurant, you might see a name and look it up and then go and visit the farm. Do you get clients from the restaurant?
People stop all the time who have eaten somewhere and will come and say, "Oh, we ate there last night. We saw that your name was on the board," and they just pop in on mostly on a Saturday when we have our stand open, and that's how they'll come. And we invite anybody to visit anytime, which is the nice thing too.
Now, what should we be doing at home to be more conscious of what we're eating?
Okay, when you go to the supermarket, you're limited as to what kind of questions you can ask, because most of the people, they won't know the answer anyway. But we always say, know your farmer. And I know it's a difficult thing to do in this world that we live in, because we're all busy schedules. The last thing on my mind is I have to know my farmer now. But it's an important thing. At least try to get some fresh, local grown, organic or naturally grown food on your table at least a couple of times a week. Maybe go to a smaller market that caters to more of a organic or naturally grown product, and just do some homework. Go online, look up the practices of different farms, and don't be afraid to ask. If you go to a farmer's market, I say this all the time, don't be afraid to ask the hard questions. Did this come from your farm? Did you grow this? Because the last thing you want is, if you go to a farmer's market and it's not even their produce and it came from someplace else, you don't know that other farmer's practices. So it's removed another generation from you knowing where your source came from.
You mentioned earlier you run this CSA program. Is that similar to like a farmer's market?
It's really a subscription service. A CSA stands for Community Supported Agriculture, where a person buys into the farm for a season of produce. And our method, we do it every other week, where a person will either get a half bushel or a bushel of vegetables through the growing season, usually from the beginning of June to the middle of October. And we pick what's ever coming from the farm at that particular time of the season, and that's what goes in the box. Again, and that helps to educate the public as to, you're not going to get tomatoes at the beginning of the season. You're going to get it at the middle of the season. You're going to get the cabbage and the beets and the turnips at the end of the season, things like that. So people start to get used to the idea of that, how seasonal works.
And what's your hopes for the future with your farm? What do you feel like expanding more?
Well, we are growing right now in about 8 acres of the 25 that we have, and we're pretty comfortable at the size that we're at because it's manageable and it's still small and it's still intimate, and we want to maintain that level with our CSA program, with our farm stand, and with our chefs.
You know, aside from working on the farm, you're also highly involved in the community, raising awareness about organic farming. I know recently a couple of years back, you worked with the Calais School in Whippany.
Right. A couple of years ago, I was employed by the Calais School. I was the graphics arts teacher.
And you created a garden for them.
Yes, and what they did, because I had the farming experience, they put me in the horticulture program too. And once they found out I had the farm, they asked me if I would design a garden for the students. And it's a special needs school. The students are wonderful, the staff is wonderful, and they gave me a great budget. And we built a beautiful garden that the horticulture students, and they have a culinary arts department too, which is really first class, that worked hand in hand. So the students were growing the vegetables, and then they were bringing it into the culinary arts department to cook it into the foods for special events at the farm, like at the school for like Thanksgiving or different holidays where we would prepare different dishes, and it was with produce that was from their own garden. So it made the students very proud of their work.
How important it is to be so actively involved with the community?
It is very important. We do a lot of library talks too. I'm engaged by many libraries to get the message out, and people really gravitate towards it. We did 2 talks recently, one in Denville Library, Denville, New Jersey, and one in Montville. We had great turnouts at both. And I do it as time permits. Now things are getting busy, so I don't have that much time, but I always try to make time for everybody.
And you do that all year long?
All year long I'll do the talks. And if people want to come to the farm, I give them tours. I'll tell them we're an open book. I'll show them everything. They can come, they can pop in at any time. We're not hiding anything, and they love it.
Well, Tony, we ran out of time. Thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
If you would like more information about Bracco Farms, visit their website, www.braccofarms.com. For more information about this episode of Carpe Diem or any other Carpe Diem, you can write to us at the email address on your screen, carpediem@mail.montclair.edu, or call us at 973-655-5158. For Carpe Diem, I'm Krystal Acosta. Thanks for watching.